mobility rocks. And shared mobility rocks.
It's time for the final beats of this 24-hour rock marathon.
I got it.
So we see Rebecca.
Now Luana is there
Luana.
also, and I
Welcome.
see Mohammed knocking on the door also. Welcome, Mohammed. We have seen you during some sessions already in the chat box. But welcome on stage, Luana. Welcome on stage, Rebecca. Welcome on stage for the final beats session. The last 30 minutes before we can go home. So
and sleep.
Time to sleep, yes.
Now first I have to celebration a little bit with the team, cleaning some things and so on. But okay, the final beats. We started 24 hours ago with the golden rules of shared mobility. That was part of the shared mobility rocks guide that was presented, and now we want to close the circle. But before doing this, we have a question for you to introduce you a little bit. So maybe we can start with Luana Bidaska. Luana Bidaska, you are from the European Commission from DG Move, but to describe yourself maybe, can you tell us your favorite, your song that could be on the soundtrack of your professional life?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy question. There are several, but I'm gonna go for Leaving. I think the band is called Journey. And yeah, I've been working in Brussels for the last 10 years. And when you keep on working in Brussels, you gotta keep on believing because it can be a bit remote. It can seem a bit distant from what's happening in cities, at least when it comes to urban mobility and all these things. So yeah, you stop believing.
Nice. We don't stop believing.
Rebecca, have you a song on your soundtrack of your professional life also?
Yeah, well, it was a bit difficult to choose. First, I chose "Green Onions" by Booker T and the MGs. It's an instrumental piece, but it's really smooth. You know, it's really smooth and cool, which is, you know, I find my job difficult to describe, but smooth and cool is often how it is. I mean, it has its turbulences, but in general, I'm very grateful. But I think the one of the songs that came up in the Some C section that's been discussed is "Imagine," and I think I would be remiss in the vibe of the conference to not choose that as my favorite. So I choose "Imagine" by John Lennon, because maybe I'm a dreamer, but after these 24 hours, I know I'm not the only one.
So we have "Imagine," "Don't Stop Believing," and Mohammed, what's your rock song?
First, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
You hear me. So my song, Assim bonanga, assim bonango Mandela China, la pecuna, la pechelicuna. It's my song, Assim bonanga, because it was that song. It was the first time I made a business trip outside of Europe, going to Zimbabwe. It was in the early 90s, and it was my first, because since that time I am working in an international environment. I'm traveling. I used to travel. Now we are not traveling this year, but it was my first mission. And this song, it was the first song I listened to when I was in the plane traveling, and then when I arrived there on the taxi going from the airport to the hotel, it was on that taxi. And then in the evening, I was invited for a dinner, and the band was playing this song, you know. And that song, it reminds me always that when I started working in this international environment. So that's the song of my professional life.
Right. And what does it mean? Do you know?
Assim bonanga it's about Mandela. It's about the men it means the men that we don't see.
Nice.
And it was about him when he was in jail.
In fact, my daughters are from South Africa, so it figures.
Okay, good. I'm happy.
So, Mohammed, we didn't present you. You are the Secretary General of the UITP. What is the UITP exactly?
Yeah, UITP is the International Association of Public Transport. So it's a French acronym. Union Internationale des Transports Publics is the oldest international association based in Belgium. It was born in 1885, so 136 years ago, as the Association of Tramways, and now we are the Association of all shared mobility modes, public transport being one of them, of course, and present in 100 countries. With 1,800 members, and our members are the public transport companies, authorities, supplying industries, etc.
So 100 countries, that means if you do a webinar, you always have to do 24 hours.
But actually, we've never done this 24 hours, and it's a great idea, actually. Now I'm going to ask this from my colleagues, because it's a great idea. We have done what we call the digital world tour, having events going from one country to the other, but not within 24 hours. So that's something I learned from.
Okay, Rebecca, we didn't present you neither. You were on many sessions, but probably not everyone knows you. You are the shared mobility manager, the mobile hub manager of the city of Bremen. That inspired us a lot. Is that okay?
Yeah, yes, that's okay. Work for the city-state in Bremen in northern Germany, and have the privilege of working with Jeffrey and Angelo at Autodeon.net and Taxistop because of the Share North project, Interreg North Sea Region project.
And then Luana, you said DG Move, but probably there's something more.
Yeah, thank you, Angelo. So I work at the European Commission in the Directorate for Mobility and Transport. We deal with a lot of things. We deal with transport policy in the European Union, but we do also have teams working on many of the things that enable digital transport services, sustainable mobility, to really a multimodal system in the European Union. Personally, I work in the urban mobility team. And I deal with issues and aspects related to research and innovation for urban mobility, as well as urban mobility policy.
That's perfect.
Okay, time to go to the golden rules. You know them by heart? Okay, that's what we did already. But now, rule number 1.
Shared mobility is a means to decrease car dependency. So we would like to ask Mohamed to give some reflection on this first rule. How do you feel about that?
Yes, sure. Decreasing car dependency, that's what shared mobility could reach. It can be a means of reducing dependency in personal vehicles, of course, to help the environment from harmful emissions, while also bettering the quality of life, bettering road safety, social inclusions. But this is only possible if it is done within a governance framework that makes the alternative available, accessible, and attractive to car owners. So if we accelerate also the decarbonization and encourage the sustainable modal shift toward public transport and active mobility. So the governance framework is very important. And also we need tools for that. We need tools that will make the access and the payment to shared modes easy and convenient. And mobility as a service could be, of course, part of these tools and part of the solution. And this at the end would contribute to the overall reduction of motorized kilometers traveled, as well as make better use of public space, because to make it that space used by people and not by cars. So it's about moving people instead of moving cars.
I've seen this hashtag from you in the previous session, I think. Very good one.
It's my hashtag. It's following me everywhere.
Okay. So let's go to the second rule. Shared mobility fosters a shift away from car use and car ownership to multimodality. So it enhances the use of zero-emission transport modes like walking, cycling, and public transport. And let's say, Rebecca, can you give some reaction or feedback on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like with car sharing, for example, car use becomes a conscious and rational decision rather than an automatic one if you have a private car in front of your own house. A study we did a few years ago, and I see that the project manager from Team Red, Hannes Schreier, who did that study for us, is here as well, showed that car share users walk and cycle and use public transport significantly more for their daily journeys than the average car owner. And we also determined that car share users have monthly transit passes, much more than the average car owner. So there's a really strong shift to active and sustainable travel modes over car use. There's the proof is in the pudding, like we have here in Brighton.
The proof is in the pudding. So let's move over to rule number 3. Shared mobility allows for densification of urban areas while liberating urban space from parked cars and strengthening value of urban green areas. I think that's a perfect one for Luana, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. So I think what's really great about shared mobility, let's think about car sharing here for a second. It's that you don't need to buy your own car. So you don't occupy public space anymore. So the city also saves on those resources. And I'm also glad that this rule mentions the word resilience. There is nothing resilient on being dependent on a single way of getting around in cities, because the system becomes open to vulnerabilities. And having shared mobility options can be a sign, or at least the beginning of a healthy multimodal ecosystem. I think this rule also is interesting because it touches on parked cars. And this is an often overlooked contributing risk factor to so many road safety issues. Parked cars can obstruct the visibility when you're crossing the street. They can cause major delays for large vehicles. So I'm thinking here worryingly about intervention vehicles, fire brigade, emergency services. So there can be actually hazardous situations. And I know that Rebecca mentioned Bremen, so maybe just as a nod to the work that you have done. I know this has been a contributing factor for the city when you have decided to remove parking spaces and replace them with car sharing stationary services. So you gave a nice incentive. You took away the parking space, but you gave something in return. So that's really great. Yeah, I'll stop here maybe and save the rest for the other golden rules.
We'll come back to you.
Okay, the fourth golden rule. Some shared mobility modes develop slowly, others quickly. Fast developing modes have a strong appeal to people and get many people on board of shared mobility. And I'm sure, Rebecca, that you agree because you are one of the authors of that. So.
I do agree. I'm also a pragmatic planner. So, most cities have limited space. So I think proponent that most cities should focus on high impact shared modes like station-based car sharing or bike sharing. But we also need to recognize that these fast-growing modes like free-floating car sharing or the e-scooters do something for the visibility of shared mobility. They're very visible, have visible branding, aggressive branding, and that creates a dialogue around sharing. It creates energy in the media for shared mobility, and even these slower growing station-based high impact varieties can benefit from that. Best of both worlds can be combined in combined car sharing systems where you have the reliable high impact station-based varieties and then the maybe lower impact but sex appeal free-floating varieties that help attract new users and generate additional visibility in the city.
Okay, great, Rebecca. We move over to rule number 5. The more modes of shared mobility that come to exist in an area, the bigger the synergy effects and the highest chance that it provides. So I think we go back to Luana for this one.
Yeah, thanks for this. Yeah, so there's nothing to disagree here with, really. I believe that the diversity of new mobility services is important, but also their availability beyond the most commercially attractive urban centers, availability and affordability. So all users should be able to afford these. The pricing is key. I think also that for the service to be attractive, it should be within reach, and they should cater to a diverse needs. Let's think about parents with children who are often quite tempted to purchase an own vehicle. So if the goal here is also to think on the long term and disincentivize car ownership, they need to be catering for and be attractive for a large variety of users. And also I would maybe say that there could be too much of a good thing sometimes. And I'm thinking here of some micromobility solutions or some schemes that came overnight in cities. There was little public oversight. So coming back to what Mohamed was saying earlier about the importance of governance, they were cluttering public space. They were going on pavements. There were a bit of a hiccup at the beginning until they got adjusted. So maybe just to have this synergetic approach and have a good win-win-win situation, they need to be integrated in an overall sustainable urban mobility plan and really fit a bit the goals that the city has.
Great, thank you.
So, time for the sixth golden rule of shared mobility. Shared mobility works best in dense areas with governmental support and policies that support the various modes. Mohamed, maybe it's time for you.
Yes, thanks. Of course, yeah, we see shared mobility more in dense areas where services can reach profitability more easily. I mean, that's one of the most important reasons, of course, for the operators of shared mobility. And that's why also we need that the public sector should encourage and support shared mobility to work more in complementarity with public transport by feeding into it. And this includes, of course, areas and times not well covered by mass transit. And this is where we can see the complementarity, and also which may be outside of the crowded hours and areas. So the last and first mile, of course, are very important. And these services, I would say, should be provided where and when needed by customer, who should be at the center of the decision making. Really, we need to think from the people perspective again here, huh? And when and where the people are expecting this kind of services. And only in this way, together and under the coordination of the authorities, and I would like to insist on that. I mean, I mentioned the governance earlier, and now the role of authorities and the coordination of authorities. And with their coordination, we can create a more integrated, sustainable mobility system, which is satisfying the needs of the most and not just a few. That's very important to have this shared mobility for all.
I couldn't agree more. Let's go to the rule number 7. In less dense areas, more guidance is needed. To make shared mobility blossom, the main drivers are local cooperation and synergies with the local business sector. And I think it's again for Mohamed from UITP.
Yeah, because I mean, if I talk about the dense areas, it will be good to talk about the low density areas too, to complement what I was saying. And if we look to less dense areas, we see that multimodality fits itself with the available resources. So this could be volunteers running a flexible on-demand minibus, for example, to connect to the closest train station. It could be community-led car sharing system. It could be also simply sharing rides with neighbors to the local market. So we see that it's the people who at the end improvise or invent their shared mobility solution. Infrastructure is also very important, as it would unlock more active mobility and cycling, but local cooperation, synergies, and co-created services are key to connect people in dense areas. And with the current trend, we expect more people to live in peripheral areas, and especially with this coronavirus crisis, we see people leaving the center of cities to live in peripheral areas and low density zones. And so this will make large scale shared mobility solutions even more needed in those areas. So that I think the future of shared mobility now is in these dense areas for sure.
Yes, it is. And yesterday we had a beautiful example in Belgium in rural areas. Just watch back our transcriptions of that. But we go over to rule number 8.
Yes, rule number 8. Local governments have to create the essential conditions for shared mobility while tackling negative aspects in a proactive way. Luana, do you agree with that?
Yes, so I agree with this. I think this is quite spot on as well. Yeah, we need to define and differentiate between services in order to create these enabling conditions, because not all of them are created equal. Some need different support than others, like, for example, free-floating electric car sharing, which is still quite an innovative service if you come to think about all the elements that need to come into play. And actually, there was some interesting data coming from the project Meister in Stockholm. This is a Horizon-funded project. And it looked at the business operation model of an e-car sharing scheme, free-floating as well, and found that it actually complements public transport, so it doesn't replace it for the routes. And the occupancy rate is higher than a personal vehicle, so people tend to more than two people in a car, which is great. We also need to talk about car occupancy as well, I think. Yeah, so policy frameworks and enabling conditions can also ensure that the business model is sustainable, that it's replicable, and it's tailored to the actual needs. And finally, that the operations also don't increase the CO2 footprint. You know, the local governments ask questions about the life cycle of batteries, for example, the safety requirements when it comes to micromobility services.
True. Rule number 9. Physical integration with MobiHut is essential to make shared mobility visible. Digital integration with MaaS helps to make shared mobility connective and gives it a strong appeal. I must admit, it seems like Mohammed is my favorite, but I'm going to ask Mohammed, what are your feelings about this?
You want me to, about rule number 9?
Yes, please.
Okay, let me read it again. Sorry, I was reading the chat. I'm sorry.
You're forgiven.
So it is, but yeah, you can see it on the screen. The integration with mobility hubs.
I'm reading it on the screen, of course. Yeah. No, physical integration with mobile hubs is essential to make shared mobility visible. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. No. Of course. But the mobile hubs are very important because it makes the integration or the moving from one mode to the other very smooth, very seamless. So these mobile hubs are very important, and we see their developments is growing now in many cities. But of course, this mobile hub will bring physical integration. What's important also is that to have an integration of the information, of the payment system, of the routing systems. So MaaS, mobility as a service, can help that. But it's important. I mean, MaaS is a tool. I see a lot of people, they are considering MaaS. I mean, when they speak about car sharing or bike sharing, they say MaaS about them. No, MaaS is the tool, is the platform that will making this integration easy between the different modes. So what is important is we have to have these modes. We have to have these solutions first available, and then we have the MaaS. Like MaaS is the software, and the modes are the hardware. So if we have the software alone, it will not help. So it's important to have these mobile hubs, to have the different infrastructure deployed, and then using MaaS as a software that will make them work between each other. So that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, we have heard the word mobile hubs in many different sessions. Even in the Spanish session, it was about mobility hubs also. So this comes back always during the 24 hours of Shared Mobility Rocks. And then we come to the final rule. Shared mobility needs clever, consistent communication and marketing over a long period of time. And I think now it's time to go to Rebecca.
I'd say amen to that. I absolutely agree, obviously. Without communication, none of it works. And communication has to be tailored to specific target groups. So the communication strategy that works with planners and decision makers is not necessarily the communication strategy that works with end users. So public authorities also have to be sensitive to that and adapt. Consistent messaging is really important, like we do here in Bremen, where we've done regular communication campaigns with our car sharing mascot, Udo, stands for Use It, Don't Own It, over many years. And also communication with mobility hubs, dropping the word again, by making shared mobility much more visible, bringing it into the public awareness. Those are two things. And that study I mentioned previously showed that among non-car sharing users, awareness about car sharing was very high. So 80% knew where the next station was and what car sharing was, and that was way above the national average. And we say it's in part down to this really consistent, transparent communication that we've carried out as a city.
Thanks a lot. The 10 golden rules of shared mobility.
Whew, this was what it's all about. Shared mobility rocks.
Still 5 minutes. Maybe a final word from them, like 1 minute per person for you, and then we are really closing it. The 2 minutes, and we will invite you all to the reception.
The final countdown.
Mohammed, do you have a final minute to share with us?
Okay. Yes, I would say that since it's about shared mobility, so I would say that the most used shared mobility solution is public transport, as you know. Now we have the opportunity to redefine public transport beyond mass transit, because when we think public transport, we tend to think mass transit, and we have the opportunity really to redefine it beyond mass transit in a way that it covers all shared mobility options to better answer the people expectation. So for me, shared mobility and public transport, it's only one. It's only one, and we need to approach it that way. And if we do that, we'll make our cities a better place to live in and people happier, because they can move door to door and not just station to station. So shared mobility and public transport is the right alliance for that.
Yes, but it's too long for an event. Shared mobility and public transport rock.
You're completely right. And
okay.
We need to use. I admit that shared mobility is more sexy than public transport for the communication.
Luana, your final minute, please.
Yeah, thank you, Angelo, for the invitation. First of all, it has been very interesting. Yes, I would like to say that we need to continue innovation. There is a continual need to increase capacity and awareness raising amongst local authorities about the benefits of this technology, these services, and we will have some new instruments for cities coming up this year in this area. So the new Horizon Europe program will be launched in April if everything goes according to plan. We will have there a mission for cities with the ambitious target to have climate neutrality in 100 cities. And of course, transport has to be part of these activities, and we hope that innovative solutions will also happen there. But of course, there is also the Horizon Europe work program. There will be partnerships on connected and automated vehicles, on zero emission vehicles, again, where shared mobility has a role to play for testing and piloting creative solutions. And then maybe finally at the EU level, it's also important to send the right messages across. So we have revised the 2013 Urban Mobility Package. The staff working document is on our website, so you can go on and see what have been the conclusions of this evaluation. And we will launch a new initiative essentially at the end of the year about urban mobility, and a public consultation will be open in spring. So keep your eyes on our communication channels, on Eltis, on Civitas, and on the DigiMove Twitter account. We will definitely announce them there, all these milestones, when they begin. Thanks.
Thank you, Luana. Rebecca.
And in 1 minute, I think I just want to close the loop again to the very first session we had yesterday at noon, together with the city of Ghent and Philippe Vatteo, the deputy mayor, and some really important messages that he mentioned is that shared mobility and shared mobility plans can't be standalone plans, like we already talked about. They have to be part of integrated transport planning and part of cycling and public transport plans and SUMPs. So every sustainable urban mobility plan needs to include shared mobility, to quote Angelo. Also, setting political goals is really important, but the goal is not important, it's the ambition behind it.
Yeah, and we were speaking about the shared mobility, the golden rules. We have a whole guide from it, written mainly written by Rebecca and Friso Metz from the Share North project. We have a little movie about this guide, and with this we are ending this event. Stay on the stage if you like. Stay with us. We will show you some pictures, some impressions, but we are closing it.
Yes,
So,
and
thanks a
please,
lot for
Before you
attending.
close it, guys, some absolute amazing recognition goes to you, Angelo and Jeffrey, for being enthusiastic, charming, energetic hosts for the 24-hour event, New Endurance. Thank you so much.
we had so much fun, and please rock with us in the final 30 seconds of this event.
Shared mobility rocks. Shared mobility rocks. Shared mobility rocks. Shared mobility rocks.